5, 4, 3, 2, 1. CTS PC. Wait, no. Sorry. CTSP EP 47. 3 episodes. 3 weeks away from episode 50.
3 weeks away, barring any unforeseen setbacks. Okay. So, we took what? It's been like 3 weeks since you've been here, Jace, because we took last week off. Then the week before that was the interview, and we're not sponsored by Swig, so I don't know why Jace is framing that perfectly for the camera. So, Swig does want to sponsor us. I'll gladly drink Swig, since Jace seems to drink it every week. But yeah, so 3 weeks, quite a bit happened.
I'm back.
In those 3 weeks.
I'm back onto the podcast. Henry kicked me off for a little bit. He sent me a letter saying that I was suspended from participating.
And suspended indefinitely.
Kind of weird.
It was 3 weeks, sorry.
Anyways, but yeah, a lot has happened the last 3 weeks. That bombing at the airport killed 12 or 13
I don't
US
think
soldiers.
we've talked about Afghanistan at all.
You don't think we've talked about Afghanistan at all?
No. Because it's been like almost a month.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like we had done it when we did the podcast with no video. I feel like we talked about it.
Maybe a little bit, but yeah, not much of the repercussions of what's been going on there.
Yeah, why don't you explain?
Well, basically, right, Trump, and correct me if I'm wrong, but under the Trump administration, they kind of made a deal with the Taliban that the U.S. military would be out by like a certain time. And that time was rapidly approaching, and so the U.S. took their troops out of Afghanistan, or most of them, and in 4 days, I think it was, the Taliban took over all of Afghanistan, and not everybody was out that needed to be out. And so in the last couple weeks, there's been a mad rush trying to get as many people out as possible, and hasn't been entirely successful or done very well.
Yeah. I think, that's an understatement. I think this whole debacle is probably up there with the most embarrassing defeats of U.S. interventionism ever. They took back the entire country. I shouldn't say the entire country, because the Taliban did hold quite a bit of land in Afghanistan, but they captured the 2 largest cities in a matter of days.
Yeah.
Including the capital. The Afghanistan minister fled to, I believe it's Qatar.
Something like that.
Just fled, just left his people.
Yeah.
And now the Taliban is running the nation.
Not very good things. Then there was, the attack on the airport.
By ISIS, not the Taliban, but yeah.
Yeah, but that happened in Afghanistan.
Yeah, that was the biggest loss of U.S. servicemen, I think, since like 2008 or something, in like almost a decade.
That's crazy. You'd think some.
In a single event, I believe it was, or something like that.
That makes sense, yeah. Yeah, just really bad stuff. It's weird to me that they didn't, because they've known this deadline for a long time. It's weird that you don't start earlier. Like, start taking people out of the country, doing that stuff earlier. I don't get why I had to wait until we took all the troops out.
So the Biden administration did say that they sent letters to people like months ago telling them to prepare and get ready and work on getting out, but I don't think anyone really anticipated that the Taliban would be taking the capital city so quickly, and that they'd just have complete control over Afghanistan so quickly. And it is, I hear people blaming Biden. I hear people blaming Trump. It's not really either of their fault. It's really we've been in a war in Afghanistan for 20 years, and they took it back in days. What
Yeah.
an absolute embarrassment. That's insane. That is literally insane.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's just weird. It's like the whole thing about um like the I just still can't wrap my head around why you don't like start taking people out of the country early, when to me it seems super logical to go, hey, maybe while we have a large military presence in the country and kind of have control of things, we should start this evacuation effort, because it doesn't seem far-fetched to me that maybe not to the scale that it happened, but that things were going to go pretty crazy once the U.S. removed their troops.
Yeah, and it is like no one really expected them. They said there was a very low probability that um, the Taliban would retake the second largest city, and then it happened. And shortly after, they took the capital city, which was like they didn't think they would do that. Um, but yeah, they probably should have started withdrawing people earlier. I don't know why they didn't. It's gonna be crazy. I can't believe that the Taliban are running Afghanistan. They're gonna change the flag. I mean, it's a new government. It's a new country.
Yeah, I mean, there's still what, like tens of thousands of people that need to get out, that like worked with the U.S. and stuff like that aren't out of the country yet, and we're past the deadline
Yeah.
now. So I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, the White House communications director, I was watching questions, and she said they're going to continue to work on getting people out. And the White House is like refusing to acknowledge there's people stranded in Afghanistan. Just completely refusing to acknowledge that. Like reporters,
Yeah.
several reporters from both sides have said, there are Americans stranded in Afghanistan. How do you plan on getting them out? And she says, they're not stranded.
Yeah.
And then the reporters were like, no, I can name several Americans that we asked questions to in Afghanistan that are stranded and cannot leave. And she said, well, if you give me the names of those people, we'll work on getting in touch with them. It's like, there are people stranded. Say it was a mistake. You're getting back. This is the most backlash the Biden administration has gotten so thus far in his presidency. And it's from both sides. And it's pretty scathing. Pretty scathing.
Yeah, I saw that thing where Biden was like, well, if people are still in Afghanistan now, it's because they want to be there. Like, they wanted to be there.
Yeah.
It's like, no. Did you see it was some, like, military official was doing an appearance on, like, CNBC or something, and he was like,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, he's like, I have a list of thousands of people that want to leave, that want to escape, that have had the Taliban come to their door and say, once the Americans are gone, like, that's it for you. Like, you're done. That are, like, fearing for their lives. And then for the Biden administration to go, no, they wanted to be there, seems pretty bad to me.
Yeah. And all of this stems from George Bush's policy in the Middle East. I think he is the one to blame. He's a warmonger, and I cannot believe he wasn't held responsible for what happened in the Middle East and what continues to happen.
Yeah.
Hot take? I don't know. But he is. He's responsible for all of this, and he knows it.
Yeah,
We went into the Middle East after 9/11 happened, we had essentially destroyed the terrorist cells in Afghanistan within the first year. They were decimated. They were decimated. We continued to occupy those countries. We went into Iraq because he said there was nuclear weapons there. There wasn't. It was an illegal invasion. And then we stayed for 20 years. And then we left, and they took it back in 4 days. Good one.
Yeah, I wonder, like, how does that happen? How do you get to a point where we've been there for 20 years and there's still enough of a presence that it only takes 4 days for the Taliban to take the country back? Like, you'd think after 20 years, either, like, you have done enough that they won't, like, you've prepared enough that they won't be able to do that, or like you've gotten rid of
Because
those
it doesn't
terrorist
work.
organizations.
Interventionism doesn't work. This stuff always seems to happen. Always. Like, unless you launch an all-out war, which you could consider this in some respects an all-out war, but nothing like we've seen, for example, when the U.S. went into Japan, right? We intervened in Japan, essentially created a new democracy in Japan, and now it's a thriving country. But if you practice that interventionism in countries that don't want to apply, that don't need it, or B, their citizens don't have a particular what's the right word I'm trying to think of? I don't want to say anything weird. I guess what I'm trying to get to is interventionism is, I just don't think it works how people think it works. And in this case, we saw it. We saw it with Afghanistan, and we saw it with Iraq. We saw it when we killed Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Like, it just doesn't work.
Why did it work in Japan and not these other places?
I think because we dropped 2 nuclear missiles on them, and then
so they just went, "Oh, we're good. Like, we like you guys now."
No. I don't think they said. I don't think that was it. I think it was literally the United States occupied Japan until there's after World War II ended, there was part of the peace negotiations, or the treaty, was the empire's regime had to go. So the empire had to go. And after the treaty was signed, I'm saying empire, sorry, I'm thinking of Star Wars. The emperor has to go. So the emperor and his regime leaves, which opens the door for, a democratically elected leader, which is how that happened in Japan. And the United States oversaw the transition with boots on the ground until that transition happened.
Yeah, so because that seems pretty similar to the blueprint with places like there's a dictator, and the U.S. comes in to get rid of them. So I'm just wondering what the difference is.
Oh, you're saying and that's what I'm trying to get to, right? Is I think I don't think interventionism at its root works. In Japan, it sort of works.
Sort of. Japan's like one of the most successful countries in the world now. I'd probably say
at what cost? We dropped 2 nuclear bombs on them. I think if we drop 2 nuclear bombs on any nation, including Russia, Canada, France, I think there's a good chance we can create any policy there we want. So I think it's sure, interventionism works, but at what cost? Do you want to kill hundreds of thousands of innocents, of citizens? Well, probably not. We did that in Iraq. We killed civilians all the time with drone strikes and what have you. We did it in Afghanistan. In the case of Afghanistan or Iraq, it obviously didn't really work. They tried to do it in Libya. They killed their leader, and now they're selling slaves on the streets of the capital city. So it's this stuff, it's never going to change. The United States is going to continue involving itself in wars it doesn't need to. And I think from here on out, you're probably going to get the same result as we saw in Afghanistan. I don't think we're ever going to have a case of interventionism that works. For example, if the United States were to go into Venezuela and kill, what's the name of the guy? It's Maduro still. I think it's Maduro. If they were to go into Venezuela, they kill Maduro. I don't think you can set policy. I just don't think it works like that. I don't think it does anymore. Did in Japan. Took a lot of lives, but it's just crazy how that stuff.
We were legitimately at war with Japan. It wasn't the intention wasn't to go in and change things. That's not why that conflict started.
Yeah.
So is that is the why of why the conflict started? Do you think that matters as far as the outcome?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think there are some cases where you have to go to war. The Japan had it coming. They bombed Pearl Harbor, they attacked the United States mainland, and then we retaliated and we went to war with Japan, who refused to surrender, by the way. before the nukes were bombed, before we dropped the nukes, they were refusing to surrender. It was going to be an ongoing, never-ending conflict. It was never going to end. Japan was going to walk away with, basically a completely destroyed nation, but the emperor was still going to rule. I think that Japan's actions, I'm not going to say that I'm not going to say the consequence was a nuclear bomb, because I don't really know how I feel about nuclear bombs being dropped no matter what happens before. But I think that us going to war with Japan on Japan's, mainland is probably, I guess your question is that really even interventionism, right? Because we were at war with them.
Yeah, so I guess I just mean, like, what's the difference between Pearl Harbor and 9/11?
I would say 9/11 wasn't carried out by the governments of these nations.
Yeah,
Japan,
that's true.
The actions of Japan
That makes sense. But I guess, and I don't know how much I buy into it, but one of the arguments was that some of those governments supported the
Yeah, but so
terrorists.
did like Saudi Arabia, right?
Yeah, so it's difficult to, it's just kind of a interesting question about why one set of circumstances that I would say we went further in Japan than we've gone here is that what it takes? Like, do you have to do that?
I think that's all. I think that's the only thing that's going to, like, I just don't see, I guess that goes back to my earlier point, is like, unless you launch an all-out war with a nation and just completely decimate everything, I feel like sort of like we did in Japan. I just don't think that you can really enact real policy change in other nations when your real enemy is these terrorist cells, right? I just don't think it works like that. Like, the Afghani government was as flawed as they are, and and obviously as cowardly as they are too. They were a lot different than like the Taliban leading the country, right? So I think it's like, we were, I don't know. It's just so hard for me to say, because I really do think that there was some good that we did in Afghanistan and even in Iraq, but I just don't see how it's our role. And I don't see how we really enacted real change. We obviously didn't enact real change because they took back everything in a matter of days. So it's like, I don't really know what to do from here. Because I don't think that 9/11 deserved to go unpunished. But how do you punish these terrorist cells without also punishing the nation? That's the tricky part, right? And I think in the case of Iraq and Afghanistan, we punished the nation too, both of those nations.
So if, like, the Taliban attacked the U.S., like there was some major terrorist attack, would you advocate a response, since they are the government now?
Yeah.
So now you're fighting the country?
Yeah.
Okay.
We would need to put boots on the ground, go to war with the Taliban and Afghanistan. If they're the ones running the country, I'd absolutely advocate for that. Because I'm not necessarily anti-war. I don't think that, especially if something were to happen like on the United States mainland, like, a terrorist attack carried out by a government, no matter what government it is, there needs to be consequences. Whether it's war or whether it's, a drone strike to retaliate. I don't know what that looks like, but.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. We've talked about Joe Rogan a few times on the podcast.
Yeah.
Have you heard the latest Joe Rogan news?
Yeah, he took a horse dewormer. What's it called again?
Ivermectin.
Yeah.
How weird is that? Like, we've agreed with him and disagreed with him, but, like, how bizarre is that to go, I'm going to take something pretty explicitly not meant for humans.
They're all just bizarre. These are bizarre people, dude. That whole, like, cell of, right wing, it's mostly right wing anti-vaxxers. It's just weird, man. It's just really weird. Can you imagine?
Do you know if Rogan's vaccinated?
He's not.
For sure?
Yeah, I'm like
positive?
99.9% sure, yeah.
Oh, I don't have my phone.
I have mine.
Look it up. Because I couldn't remember if he said he wasn't vaccinated or if this was just like secondary stuff.
Let's take a look. So this New York Times article, just the headline is Joe Rogan, a podcasting giant who has been dismissive of vaccination, has COVID. Yeah, I don't think
But
he.
that doesn't.
I don't think he
I haven't
has
seen
gotten the
anything
vaccine.
that explicitly says he hasn't gotten the vaccine. Though, like everything's like, oh, like he's been dismissive of the vaccine, but everything I saw with him being dismissive of the vaccine was more like, because he had that thing that like everyone freaked out about, where he's like, if you're
Yeah.
young and healthy, you probably don't need the vaccine.
I don't think we know if he has it or not. I'm just looking through. One of the articles is entitled "Is Joe Rogan Vaccinated?" ? And that was pretty recent. Interesting. But yeah, he used ivermectin to treat it.
So if you aren't vaccinated, I don't get where the thought that the vaccine that's FDA approved is worse for you than like horse dewormer. What's the logical kind of the leap there?
There is no logic. It just doesn't make sense. It objectively doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I do think one thing I was thinking though is those like fitness nuts. I think there's a lot of stuff they take like on a regular basis that you'd go, that's kind of weird that you're taking. So maybe horse dewormer isn't that big a leap.
That's got to be up there with the weirdest, though.
I
Horse
don't know, man.
dewormer?
Some of those supplements, like even stuff that's like super common, like creatine and stuff like that, is like pretty weird when you get like looking at it.
Well, yeah, none of them are FDA approved. Supplements don't have to get FDA approval.
Yeah.
Vitamins, all that stuff.
So even on that level, like the vaccine is already at a higher level of vetting than any of those supplements that I know all of those guys take.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff too with those supplements. Like, I can't remember. I've learned a little bit about it, but I'm pretty sure like the supplement companies have like a lot of protection because they don't need to get FDA approval and it's not considered, a treatment for anything. I don't know. But yeah, some of that stuff contains like elements that will literally kill you. Like some of the ingredients in there
I don't get
really
it.
bad.
So I just can't understand where what mindset you have to be in to go, this vaccine that's like been approved by the FDA, it seems like such a leap to go, well, because the first argument was, well, it's not approved by the FDA, it's just like emergency use. Well, now it is approved by the FDA. So then are you saying that the FDA is like corrupt and like didn't do, like there wasn't due process or whatever? But then does that apply to like every other thing the FDA is approved? Because if the FDA is corrupt, then they probably didn't just barely happen.
Well, and then not only is the FDA corrupt, but the Food and Drug Administrations of every other major nation in the entire world are corrupt. And they're all in on this scheme to provide a vaccine that's faulty and didn't undergo the proper research and doesn't have the backing of doctors. All of the doctors that advocate for the vaccine are all in on it. The scientists that did the experiments, all of these people are in on this giant corruption scheme, is what these people believe.
Nobody's like blown the whistle.
Nobody.
The thousands and thousands of people that
across the world
must be involved. Not a single one went, hey, somebody just told me to lie about this and I don't want to.
Yeah.
You'd like to think that at least one of those,
no,
probably tens of thousands of people, has some sort of conscience, but
no, they're all in on it. Isn't that
bizarre.
weird?
It's
all 50 governors from both sides of the aisle have been vaccinated.
Yeah.
Donald Trump's been vaccinated. Biden, every living U.S. president has been vaccinated.
The suspension of disbelief.
They're all in on it. And you know what's ironic is the people that most of the anti-vaxxers are like Trump supporters or Republicans, I should say. Like, probably supporters of Trump, who's also saying to get the vaccine. So Trump is also in on it, but they don't want to believe Trump this time around.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And it's, like And it's weird that, like, the Rogan thing is weird, too, because he's pretty liberal on a lot of things.
You know, he says he's liberal. I think he's like a closeted conservative. He's secretly really Republican conservative guy that for the purposes of his podcast says he's like a leftist or a liberal, that he would vote for Bernie Sanders. No,
you
he
think?
wouldn't. Yeah, I've seen so many episodes of his podcast, and I've been waiting for something like really hot leftist take, and he just doesn't have a lot of hot leftist takes. A lot of his takes, like all of his stuff about, you know, one of his big talking points is censorship. That's more of a right wing thing. All of his stuff about
Is it really
smaller government,
should
right wing
it be?
thing, vaccination status, right wing thing, not having to share vaccination status, no vaccination cards, like. These are,
But that's stuff I could bring up a list of just as much stuff that, like, he said that, I mean, he advocates for, like, universal basic income, like the Andrew Yang thing. He was a big supporter. Like Bernie Sanders, he was a big supporter. I don't know. I just think it's weird that this is a place where he kind of crosses the aisle on for something that just seems nuts to me.
it is nuts. Yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff. I've never seen anything like this when it comes to vaccines or like any medical care. And what's funny is right wingers are usually like really protective of doctors and like, you know, like medical professionals, and they're usually conservatives have a pretty strong regard for those type of people.
Well, it's just a tribal thing, right? Because even if you think back to the start of the pandemic, when it was kind of flipped, where it was like Joe Biden said, if the vaccines developed under Trump, like I don't know if I would trust it. If I would Kamala said that. Biden said something like that too, I think. But yeah, they were like, oh, I don't know if I would trust it. I don't know if I would get it. And then it flipped, obviously. And so it just, to me, feels super hollow. And I don't know why people are buying into that tribalist thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think both sides are pretty at fault for it.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. What Kamala said was really bad, and she got no backlash for it.
No backlash whatsoever.
That's insane.
It's crazy. People were like, I saw the reaction online was basically, oh yeah, she's right. Like, I don't think I would trust it either. I just try and go, well, if the roles were flipped and instead it was like Trump was coming into office and he said that, I'm positive every CNN article, every MSNBC article would have been like losing their minds.
Yeah.
And just no backlash.
Pretty crazy stuff, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it's good to be back after a few weeks.
Yes, sir.
Wrap this one up here. Okay.
CTS EP 47.